So you don't want to change your name? Don't worry. To God, it's all the same. Hey guys, it's Katie, and I am your host of Faith at Work, and I am here today to talk about my name change. What's in a name? To me, I've been married for almost 6 years, and I still have not taken my husband's name. So, some people feel really strongly about this, some people don't. I want to kind of dive into what was going on with me. So, I'm about to have to spend like hours at the Social Security office. It's going to be a whole situation because if you don't do it right away, I don't know if you do this, but right when you get married, if you do it, it's super simple. It's like a piece of paper. After that, it's a whole situation. So I am like avoiding this thing because I do not want to sit at that office and just be there for hours. But what is it all about? So when I first was getting married, I think before I was married, it all comes down to your relationship, I think, with your family, your father, your name, how people feel about your name, and how you feel about your name. I didn't get married until I was in my late 30s. So I developed all of this identity wrapped into my name, my last name, right? So I was getting business licenses. I'm a broker, I'm a builder, I've got this account, that account. Everything is tied to my original name, Wordcheck. And so when I first was getting together with my husband, his name is Lober. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to be a Lober. Like I started associating things with his name and, oh, I don't want to do this, I don't do that. But when I really looked down to the heart of it, I wanted to figure out what is it about changing my name that was so resistant in my body. And it had more to do with identity, submission, independence, and really, if I want to get down to it, it's fear. So let's dive into that and see like what is it in a name? So identity. We all think that our identity is locked into our name, our status, our job, all of that. But I want to remind you that your identity is in Jesus Christ. And if you know that, then there's no job, there's no recognition, there's no change of your name that's going to stop your relationship with God and who you are known of, which is a child of God. So our names carry history, meaning. I'm not going to say that they don't, but what is really behind it is Isaiah 43:1. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. Did you notice that it didn't say called you by your surname or called you by your family name? We were looking into this and I was like, oh my gosh, none of the people in the Bible are named with their last name. It's not Jesus what? It's Mary of Magdalene. It's Jesus of Nazareth. It's everyone was known by maybe the tribe that they came from, but it wasn't part of their name. So I was like, okay, is this biblical or not? And I think we'll get down to that in a little bit of why it might be biblical for you personally with your relationship with your husband or your wife. Because I think this is a personal thing, not necessarily an 100% biblical thing, which we can debate that later. So God already knows you by name. He put every hair on your head. He knows your whole story. So whether you are a Wordcheck, Lober, Smith, DeGloria, whatever your name is, it really doesn't matter to God. So why does it matter so much to you? So when I was getting into identity, my personal reflection on this is with my dad. So I don't have a huge relationship with my dad. It's been like tumultuous. Like we've talked for 8 years and don't talk, and then we talk and then we don't talk. And our relationship has never been really strong. So in the time that I met my husband and we were getting married, I didn't have a great relationship with my dad. And I think replacing that name actually made me feel like I was going to lose all connection with my dad. Because if I don't have the same name as him and we don't have a relationship, then what is the connection that I have to him? So I think I was holding on to this identity as my dad's daughter with my last name. And it was either good or bad, right? Like either someone would be like, oh, you're Mike's daughter, or, oh, you're Mike's daughter, right? Like everyone has their own interpretation of people. So it wasn't that I was like looking to be associated with him. It was like that last piece of connection that I felt like whether my dad and I were talking or not, I had that connection to him personally by having his last name. So if you flip that around and you think, okay, well, what about my husband? So we actually asked my husband today, like, how does it feel that I didn't change my name? And it was immediately, his feeling was like disappointment, right? It was a lack of respect. Like, why don't you want to be my wife and have the same name as me? So I think if your partner is feeling like that, it has to do with this submission. So number 2 is like submission. feeling like if you go with your husband's name, then are you really an equal party to that, right? Why isn't he changing his name to mine, which I actually tried to get him to change his name to a third name that I had created. We will talk about that maybe on another episode, where I was like, hey, you don't need your name. I don't need my name. We're becoming one. Let's become one under this new name that we both create. And it didn't work, just to say. Obviously, we don't have that name, so it did not work. So as women, we resist that word submission. It is like you just see it all day on the news, even in our own office. We talk about it, that we are just so worried about this word submission to our husband. And what we're not realizing is that God is not having us submit like we're the slave of our husband. We are the helper. We are literally created out of our husbands to be one and have oneness in God. So the biblical part of that is Ephesians 5:22 through 24. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. It isn't about being diminished. It's about honoring God's purpose for your relationship is that you guys become one. So when we go to check into a hotel and I have the reservation under Wercheck, they would call Anthony Mr. Wercheck. I don't know if any of you guys are feeling that, but that is not good. Like, he did not like that. It was almost like he felt an immediate disrespect by having someone else call him that name. So when I started noticing that, I started realizing that this thing that I just decided on my own, that I didn't really sit with God and sit with Anthony and really decide, it started making me feel like this is something that I'm doing because I don't trust that I can be protected under Anthony, right? That my heart is protected. Because if my heart is protected under my husband, why would I not take his name? So that's kind of what started coming up for me. And what I think is now is getting into the independence factor. I didn't get married again until I was in my late 30s. I was very independent. I had my own money, my own job, my own career. I had multiple businesses, licenses. I make everything on my own. I can totally be self-sufficient. But that's where we get in trouble. Is that self-sufficiency, not just from a man, but when we think we have it all together and we have it all figured out and we are not relying on God, God will show us real quick. And that's what happened to me, is my identity was wrapped up in my job. I was never submitted to a man, and I had all my independence in what I was doing for myself by myself. Like, I don't need you, right? That's our culture right now. Like, I don't need a man. I can get, what do people do? Like, are artificially inseminated? I mean, you can literally have a baby, have a family without even having a dad. So that whole concept has kind of changed the way that we feel about our independence as women. The biblical reference to this is Genesis 2:24. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Taking the name is just like a shared oneness with your husband or with your wife. And I think that it's really important now that I'm on the other side of it, right? I've sat 6 years with a different last name, and I see that. I see that iron sharpens iron. We need each other. We need each other to grow, get better. And it's all this independence talk, and I can do it all on my own, is making people isolated and lonely. And how do people operate when they're isolated and lonely? They are not operating at their true calling through God. I know that because we are called to create, love each other, to help the poor, help the sick, disciple, heal each other, put hands on each other. We are called to all these things. So if you're just sitting by yourself, you're not accomplishing anything that God had you put literally in this time, on this very specific day in this world to do. So Michael Knowles actually said on a podcast that in fighting the patriarchy, women are actually keeping hold of the patriarchy by keeping their father's name. So think about that. You're like resisting this thing about taking your husband's name to be like, I'm a powerful, independent woman, and you're keeping your father's name. So it's like you're not really fighting the patriarchy, which I don't know if that's really what you were trying to do, but some women are by keeping their name and being independent. It's like, well, you're still keeping your dad's name. So you might want to think about that. And then the big one, you guys, is fear. It's fear. I grew up watching a broken relationship and a broken household. And when you watch that, you instantly create this sense of that will not happen to me. Not on my watch, not while I'm alive. I will not have a man telling me what to do, paying for everything, so I'm dependent on him, and then leaving me high and dry, right? I saw someone leave their wife. So for me, it's all rooted in that. When I give myself over to Anthony, but I keep that little thing for myself, my name, it was like a little protective layer that I had on myself because of the fear that one day he would leave and then I'd be left with his name. How embarrassing. That's really how I look at it. It's like, it's so embarrassing to have this man cheat on you, leave you, and then you're sitting around walking around with his last name. There's something so rooted in that for me that I watched divorce. So divorce wasn't something that I would never consider before I had a relationship with God. And me and Anthony bringing our relationship to God changed that for me. Divorce is not in our vocabulary. Anything can be worked on. And I think this message really is for people who you might even be feeling like your divorce is or your marriage is in a really bad place, maybe heading towards divorce, or it's like something that's always in your head. You need to pray. You need to get the power of a praying wife, and you need to realize that your husband cannot fill the void that's in your heart. Only Jesus can fill that void. And once Jesus is there, man, it takes the pressure off your husband like crazy. And the end of the first prayer in that says, make my husband a new wife and let it be me. Like, give my husband a new wife and let it be me. I still get like little goosebumps on that because I did that. I transformed how I treated my husband and how our relationship was once I was filled with the love of Jesus, because I wasn't relying on my husband to make me complete or make me feel good or to make me happy. I was happy on my own. And then I realized that us together is to glorify God and to help other people see the oneness and the trueness that you can have with an amazing relationship like marriage with God. And so let's be real. Sometimes it's hard to not just like resist that temptation to be afraid of the future. Like, what if? All those what ifs are going to lead you to protect yourself, and protecting yourself might be what you're doing by keeping your own name. So just something to think about. It's not judging it. I did it for 6 years. I'm about to change my name tomorrow. So I'm newly going to do this. So I know where you're at. Biblically, 2 Timothy 1:7. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. Wow, right? No backup plan, no plan B. Because if you're not afraid of what someone's going to do to you, you don't need a backup plan. You're all in. And if you're not all in on your marriage, then you are not married. Straight up, repeat that again in your head. If you are not all in on your marriage, you aren't married, because that's what marriage is. It means we are together for sickness and health, death do us part. You are one. So my thing with surrendering is all God's design for me, I thought, was to be alone. I mean, I really did think back in the day, like, I don't want kids. Maybe God put that in my heart not to have kids. I don't need a family. It just didn't matter to me. And then when I finally found my husband, but later than that, when we found our relationship with God, is when I really realized what marriage is all about and what I'm here to do. And when I realized that I was afraid of losing him and all that embarrassment, I knew that the one thing I needed to do to make sure that my husband knows that I have full respect and that I have submitted to our relationship and to our oneness is to go change my name so that we are one in every single thing that we do. And so even though this might not be biblical, this is something that's going to be personal between you and your husband, you and your wife. Like I said, it's something that there is huge power in a name. So let's go back to the Bible with this as well. So God changing someone's name is a recurring theme in the Bible. And when he did it, it was to kind of set them aside and call them to like their next adventure, right? Or their next calling through God, or to anoint them in something. So my calling to be Anthony's wife is reflected in me taking his name, just like Abram was changed to Abraham, father of many, right? In Genesis 17:5. Sarai was changed to Sarah, Genesis 17:15. Saul was changed to Paul, Acts 13:9. Each name change symbolized God's promise and his transformation that you will have once you know whose you are and who you are, which is not tied to your husband, your wife, or anything going on in this world right here. It's tied to your relationship with God. So if you're hesitant to taking your husband's name and you're facing this big change, our identity is always safe in Christ. So just remember that. You are going to be fine. There's no what if or plan B that is needed because God's plan is so much better than what you have concocted in your head of what your future is going to look like. And the closing verse I want to leave you guys with is Revelation 2:17. To the one who is victorious, I will give a white stone with a new name written on it, known only to the one who receives it. God has a name and identity for us that's eternal. It's filled with purpose. So if you're kind of tied to this or you have comments, questions, I know that some of you are going to have a whole story around changing your name or needing a new name or being resistant to this. I would love to know what you're feeling about it. Let's have a discussion in the comments. And until then, stay elevated. Hey guys, if you want to see more episodes like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow. And we'd love to hear what you think. See you in the comments. And until then, stay elevated.